Nick, we need to talk.
Yes, we do.
We need to talk about you. We need to talk about me.
Yeah.
And we need to talk about Kevin.
Yes.
And we need to talk about Kevin.
And one of the best movies with not one of the best titles.
Yeah. Spoiler alert, they don't really ever talk about Kevin.
Yeah.
No, it's
And there's no Kane in Citizen Kane.
There you go. We'll talk about that too. Welcome to Kyle and Nick on Film. Today we are going to talk, we need to talk about Kevin.
Yeah.
Definitely, like, Lynn Ramsey has been known the past couple years for making films that are hard to watch with titles that are very long.
Yeah.
And I think we're gonna break this one down for you guys today and talk about the uncomfortability. We're finally talking about a movie that Nick has just watched for the first time.
Slightly disturbing. In fact, it's more disturbing than any horror movie.
Exactly, and we're going to get into that as well. What is this film? Does it qualify as a horror film? What is it? We need to talk about Kevin. And hey, we're going to talk about it.
Hi, I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast.
And I'm Kyle Goethe from GoatFilmReviews.com.
Today we're going to talk about Lynn Ramsey's, one of her knockout films. She did The Ratcatcher, I think, something like Mover and Collar. This one really put her on the map.
Yeah.
We need to talk about Kevin. Basically, the plot is the development of a mom having a child and the questions and the fears of that development of the child, be a good or bad person, or are you part of it, or are you responsible for it?
Yeah, and it's really presented in a stream of consciousness almost, where we kind of jump around in time. I know upon my first viewing I found it a little jarring at the beginning because we do hop back and forth. The film stars Tilda Swinton as Eva. She is a novelist who is kind of like hitting that rut part as she begins a family, as she deals with her son who does these increasingly odd behavioral things.
Yeah, Tilda plays is perfect because there's a sense of coldness to this, but she understands it. There's a lot of self-aware that she's not necessarily the greatest mother in the world, and then she gives up her career for being a mother. So there's this whole polling of giving up, sacrificing, of giving and proceeding, and not only that, perception of, am I doing this to my kid? Is my kid already like this? Am I making things worse? Am I helping? Am I not helping?
Yeah, and I think her playing off of Ezra Miller's Kevin. Ezra Miller is a tremendous actor, and I think this shows the kind of range and difficulty, and like he's not afraid to play someone that you really don't like. I mean, Kevin is a very troubled child, and I think if he played him with an ounce of sympathy, we would come across more parental questions about the film than we do. And I think he knows that, like, he needs to play it as straight as he can, with a goal in mind. And it's a really difficult journey watching these two play off each other, and especially John C. Reilly, of course, who plays the husband Franklin. He is perhaps my most hated character in the movie.
There's a sense of delusion, like he doesn't want to see or come to terms or understand anything that gets brought up to him. He almost shuts it down. So, like, he's still in that state of denial.
Mm-hmm. Very oblivious father figure.
In a little bit.
But
John C. Reilly's perfect for that.
He's great in the movie, and I think we overlook him because he gained so much success with things like Step Brothers or Talladega Nights. We forget of the ability he has as a dramatic actor or a dramatic comedic actor, and I think he provides a little bit early on in the film of, like, joy that we get to see sucked out of the equation.
What we talked about the editing. What I do like about this film is Lynn Ramsey is not going to hit you over the head with the storytelling. She's going to visually tell it to you. This is actually a visual, even though it's based on a book. This is a visual presentation of the movie. You begin the movie with her, the damage of her house where she lives, and then the red. And you notice that red is very important in this movie. It's not, well, you get over the head with that, but the projection of you're not going to get a sense of she's babying it to you, she's feeding it to you.
Yeah, this
almost
is one
like Nolan would do.
Yeah, she definitely presents it in terms of, like, here it is, like, just it's out there, and like a couple other films that we've talked about in the past, like, she gives you the information and she lets you do with it what you will. Yeah. In the book, there's very much Eva's presented as a much more like unreliable narrator. And we don't get that force-fed so much. It's like we do get questions about the timing of things. I mean, they've owned this house throughout the film for years, and there was a large expanse of time where they don't buy anything. They don't put anything into the home. It's not really a home. It's just a building that they're in. There's a lot of questions about timing of the whole film. Especially things like if Kevin is displaying this behavior, we don't ever get a sense that they're going to get help for him.
No, it's almost like we can solve it ourselves.
Yep, and there's definitely a denial on both of their parts for a long time. I mean, the way that Kevin treats Eva throughout the film,
and his sister as well,
and the fact that they don't seem to act, and I think that's why the title "We Need to Talk About Him" is not just we have to talk about we are going to talk about him. Yeah. There is a bubbling need to do something that neither one of them is willing to acknowledge. I think that's really strong.
Over since the cinematography is actually not as dominant, it's going to be good. Mm-hmm. But that's not what you're interested in here. Here, the cinematography works well with the hierarchies, like Kevin's watching over his parents talking about him. Here, you have the perception of him aggravating his sister, where everyone in the world thinks they're just being nice to each other. So it's like where cinematography is really good at it. It's not going to be out in front.
Yeah, Seamus McGarvey did the cinematography, and he's one of those interesting guys who can do really restrained films like this one and like Nocturnal Animals, and he can do really flashy stuff like The Greatest Showman. And I think in terms of this one, he does pull it back, and with Nocturnal Animals too, he's able to, he waits. He lets the camera sit for an extra beat, and he really lets you breathe in the imagery that you're getting. And those two films are very similar in just the uncomfortability of what's being done. And the way he shoots the later on scenes with the way we shoot the flashback scenes, very strong, I think, overall. And being able to have that voyeuristic look. Everyone's always looking at someone.
And there's a sense of, I'm not responsible. Throughout the whole, every character has a sense of, I'm not responsible for the events that are happening. In fact, even Kevin, the character, says, well, where do you think I get this from? So everybody, that's what a deep meaning is, who is actually responsible for this? And, the consequences for this. The story, I like that it's cut up. If it went linear, I don't think it would work as well.
Yeah, and that's even true even knowing that, let's be honest, we're not going to ruin the end of the film, but I feel like you can see where it's heading pretty early on, and you just have the details to fill.
No, it's a great play where he orders something and it gets shipped, and that's not good. Mm-hmm. And everybody else watching is good, and the parents are like, what?
It's something where even if the film was presented linearly, you would have known something's wrong. And that's maybe the most frustrating part about the movie is you're not in it, but if you were, you could scream to the rafters, do something. Yes. And it continues to move along whether you like it to or not. And that way, this film is never going to be, I feel like, on my rotation. It's never going to be like with my comedy films, or like even during October, I'm never going to pop this one in on a regular basis during the Halloween season.
I do have one barometer with movies is a movie unforgettable or memorable. And Lynn Ramsey is definitely working in the area of unforgettable. When you see a Lynn Ramsey movie, you will remember you see these movies.
Even if I think you don't want to. It definitely stays with you. It's got that level of like a Precious almost, where like it's just, you almost want to forget what's going on. But the way that she deals with...
not really horrific. There's really no presented violence, and it's a violent movie.
It's a violent movie, but we don't see... really any violence in the film. We see before and we see after. And I think it's really well done, especially for a smaller film. And this film was never going to get a lot of financing, so you have to shoot this thing on the small.
And when they throw red paint on her, it's a nice metaphor for the kids releasing their anger on her, but it's a nice metaphor of what she has to deal with.
Yeah. And I think that's where I like the stream of consciousness and the editing the way it is because she's living both these timelines at the same time. She's in the present, but she's still dealing through the past. It's a really good depiction of like the trauma, the shock, the breakdown that happens.
And there's a stuff where she knows that she's going to hell.
Yeah, I love that scene because it's played for laughs, but then again, there's that uncomfortability,
that self-awareness for her.
McGarvey leaving the camera on her for a little longer because again, like. When I open the door and I see two people standing there dressed the way those guys are dressed, I know what's going to happen.
I like that. It was a wonderful play.
Yes, and then she's able to say what she wants to say, and then leave it there for a second and then close the door. And I think again, it holds you, and you're kind of like, oh. Overall, I think it's a difficult film to watch, and it deals with the difficulty in raising a child. Like I'm happy my wife doesn't want to watch this movie again because I think seeing this film probably more than once will kind of deter any ability we have to ever have kids. It reminded me a lot of other films though about like the horror of having a child, like The Brood from David Cronenberg. I thought about The Good Son.
Like there's the classic movie, The
Bad Seed. And then I think even like to a newer extent, films like Brightburn, which was kind of that twist on the Superman mythos.
It's almost like we need to talk about Kevin, but it's Superman.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we're allowed to kind of tell these stories now because we don't have to sell the tickets that we used to once have. This film is a much better film, I think, in the comfort of your own home than in a theater.
So this is my first time actually seeing it, and actually it's a great movie.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously it's not the feel-good movies, and we not watch movies just to feel good all the time and just for entertainment. This is a well-established, very mature, developed movie.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I think walking away from this one, having seen it before, I think it does work better for me on a second viewing. And it's not because I think just you know what you're getting into. And this is a film I would warn you know what
This is why I bring up the
watching.
cinematography, because even though it's a simple story, there's a lot of components they're putting into where it works, where everything is placed, where things happening. And right, they move into an established house, but they don't do anything, which is a great metaphor to their lives. They present a shell, but inside it's vacant.
Exactly. Yeah. And just the forward momentum never really being there. And even, of course, too, like, her home in our present day sense.
And they're never going to advance anything. They're going to stick into their...
And all we see her do in the present sense is she cleans up the mess. She didn't do anything to avoid the mess. Which, I mean, you can't really do much to avoid that, but like the red paint, she didn't do anything to avoid the damage. She's just cleaning up to it. She's getting back to zero, but she isn't improving her home.
I like that mention. She's working her way back to zero. There's no way moving on.
Yeah, exactly. So, we need to talk about Kevin, a fantastic film, a very difficult watch.
I still don't like I love this movie. I just don't like the title.
It's the same thing with You Were Never Really Here. Like it's one where like I feel like the film's title is forgettable outside of the boy's name.
Yes. Yeah.
It's a difficult movie to watch, but I do think it has 3 central performances that make the film watchable. I think this film would be so much more difficult to view if you didn't have the astounding work by John C. Reilly, by Ezra Miller, and I gotta give a big shout out to Tilda Swinton, who I think is one of the most underappreciated people working in the business.
Somebody simple would have made this. You want to feel sorry for her.
Yes,
they would have made it lazy of just making. This is a conflicted person who knows this awful event happened, and she doesn't have the currency, doesn't have in her how to change.
Yes, exactly.
So she knows she has to.
Nick, first viewing, do you recommend we need to talk about Kevin?
Absolutely outstanding filmmaking, visual filmmaking, visual storytelling. One of the best adaptations from a book to a movie. It doesn't subtract anything, doesn't really modify anything. It presents a nice case from what happened in the book into the movie. Nice case for Ezra Miller. Red. Everything he does has to be surrounded by red.
Mm-hmm. Yep. But I think it shows because he's a person that, beyond what's going on in his personal life, like being the Flash, being in the Harry Potter world, he's able to do these smaller films really well too, and it makes a good case for him having more at stake in those larger films.
I'm not going to bring that up, but I do like the subtle OCD effect of putting things in a row. I like that point.
Yes.
It doesn't really answer, but it presents a little bit of a hint of some disturbing
an
disorders.
Order and the chaos and kind of the chaotic order of that kind of issue.
Fantastic movie.
Yes, I know. I gotta recommend it for myself too. I think it's a wonderful film. Check it out, but definitely know what kind of movie you're gonna watch. I cannot stress that enough.
It's not a Saturday night popcorn.
No, carve out 2 hours for an Ace Ventura film when you're done. Yeah. That's it for us, guys. Please check out our Patreon, patreon.com/KyleNickOnFilm. You guys can help support us that way. And hey, we use some of your recommendations from Patreon when we talk about the films we're going to talk about on future episodes.
Be part of the team.
Yeah, and you can also help us out by liking the video, commenting below your thoughts on We Need to Talk About Kevin. I'm sure you have some. If you've seen the film, I know you do. Click that subscribe button so you can get new episodes every single week here on Kyle and Nick on Film's YouTube channel.
We appreciate the feedback.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. Nick, where can we find you out and about?
I'm the host of the St. Paul Filmcast. You can find it on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and Spotify.
You can find all my film reviews on goatfilmreviews.com and follow me at Almighty Goatman on Twitter and Instagram for all my weird, wacky thoughts about life. Yep. Thank you guys for joining us. We need to talk next week, so come on back.
Yes.